What's going on, guys? Bel Air here, Need Boost podcast. Crazy weekend from Europe, and we are certainly going to talk at length about Geekay and their unbelievable run. It still feels like something that didn't even occur. It is the Luka Doncic trade of RLCS results, although maybe that's being a little ridiculous. I want to do some European to NBA team comps as we have completed split one for the European region. And I definitely want to talk about some North American expectations as well, as we have our top 16 that have locked for that event. But first, we have to start with GK, don't we? Which it's pronounced GK. In the past, I've said Geekay. I know that people have been split on this, but it was confirmed by Joyo, but more specifically by their coach Nick during their winning interview that it is GK, which is great because that's easier to say. But just for a quick recap, I mean, they come into this event, they're in 7th place, and the only scenario which seems ridiculous for them to even qualify for the Birmingham Major is for them to win the grand finals. Not only does that seem ridiculous just because of the lackluster form that they felt like they were in, that they looked like for Open 1 and 2, but also just the fact that Vitality looked awesome. Carmine Corps are the best team in the world coming into this. Ninjas in Pajamas are trying to lock. Dignitas have looked really hot in Open 2. So the road to get there was murky, and they lose their first series of Open 3 in the top 16 to Vitality. So they drop to lowers. So from here on out, it's win or go home. And we find our way to the playoffs, and they're up against 100%. And that's a really tight matchup. Two teams that both need to win or go home if they want to make it to Birmingham. They end up eking out a win over 100% in 7 games. 100% were up late in that game. There was an incredible double off the ceiling from Archie that kept Acro stuck on his own backboard that ends up going in. And they end up closing things out late into that one. So a nail biter. And from there, the tear just continues. They eventually end up sweeping Dignitas, which was like, all right, I guess they're really here. And then they go ahead and they shut out Carmine Corps in games 3 and 4 as they end up sweeping Carmine Corps. Not only have Carmine not lost all season, but to get swept was just ridiculous. Even as it was happening, it wasn't, because Carmine Corps want to cement themselves as the best in the world. They want to get that three-peat, but you couldn't help yourself from being like, is this rigged? Are they like, are they losing on purpose? It almost didn't even make sense as you were watching it, just because of how preposterous the result is based on the form of those two teams coming in. Atau had a series that he would like to bury and forget forever. And we'll probably talk about this as we get closer to the major. But if you're trying to have me make the strongest argument I can against Carmine Corps, that would be a perfect example of the thing that I've been not fearful of, but aware of all season, which is this team are the best in the world. All the pressure is on them. Can you go out and win despite that pressure? And in a pressurized situation there, of course, they had already locked, but you're trying to get the three-peat and shut down this GK team, and just to get run over is not a great result for Carmine Corps. So still the favorites. I don't think that's changed for a lot of people. But back to GK here, it really reminded me of the 21-22 Winter Major run. And if you guys don't remember, that's when this Team Queso, I don't know if you guys have heard of them, Rise, Joyo, and Vatira, they dropped to lowers. They end up winning 6 straight. They beat a ton of great teams. They took down NRG, Evil Geniuses, who else am I forgetting? Just some really high quality teams, and they end up G2 come from the upper bracket and they have a double elimination and they end up winning the first series. And it's like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. Like, I cannot believe that Team Queso are going to do this. And it's in LA. So G2, there's all this pressure of like the hometown thing. And, that team is so good. And it's J Naps is trying to secure his first RLCS official major win. And, ultimately G2 end up winning that. That's when we get the moment from J Naps where he's like, people ask me what would happen if I never would have won a major. I guess we'll never know, he says. And of course, there is some serendipity there with the fact that J Naps has announced that this Open 3 is going to be his final event before he retires. But we're going to talk about North America a little bit here. But it also reminds me a little bit of what we had seen from Oxygen during the World Championship last season. Remember, they weren't even supposed to be there. And if you watched my last YouTube video talking about the weekend, we already talked about this, but Oxygen come in with basically no pressure. They get invited because one of our MENA seeds drops out and they end up going on a tear. They eliminate Gentlemates from the tournament. They eliminate Vitality from the tournament. And they took 2 games off of Falcons before that they ended up getting beat there. So when you put Archie and Joyo in a situation where it's just like, hey, no pressure, let's just go out and hoop, the two of them can be one of the most lethal duos in the world. And I know that their coach Nick had put out a tweet showing how long it had been since they all won regionals. Exciting stuff for them. Just a team that seemed like they got their joy back. Joyo was talking about that in the post event interview that he did, where they felt as though they were not performing up to their standards in the first 2 opens, despite what they felt was the quality of the team and the quality of their performances in scrims. But they end up after Joyo puts out a tweet that seemingly had some frustrations baked into it after their Open 2 exit. They just figured, no pressure. Like we have a uphill battle anyways. They felt like they got their joy back. The have fun meta that was instituted by NRG back in the day seems like that might be back. And all the good stuff for GK. The bummer here is that Ninjas in Pajamas have missed out. And the ironic thing about that is that on GK's route Sunday to winning this whole thing, former NIP teammates across the board helped GK steal their spot out from under them on Oski's birthday, no less. And Joria's last season teamed up with Nas on M80. Joria's gets swept as part of the Dignitas roster as GK move on from the semifinals to the finals. And then in that finals, Atau and Oski, former Team Liquid teammates, and of course Vatira and Itachi on Carmine Core. So ended up getting burned by their former teammates, which there's some sad irony in that. But Ninjas in Pajamas, we're gonna do some more podcasts in the future, just talking about the off season as we head towards the trade deadline. We're gonna have a lot of time to think about that and marinate. But just initial thoughts. I mean, you're in a really tough spot because it basically seemed like you had it locked there. But at the same time, Ninjas in Pajamas didn't have a perfect split. They did not control their own destiny here, even though the odds of GK stealing their spot were very low, especially given the circumstances. They did not have the quality of results to secure their own destiny. And for a team with so much talent, it just it never felt like it was working exactly as you'd intend. And I know I had seen some stuff online from Ninjas in Pajamas fans kind of talking about what the issue is, and I'd want to give it some more thought before I really give perspective there. But this is the first major that Itachi has missed in many seasons, probably all the way back to the 22-23 season. So when he was teaming with what, Astral and Nali on Carmine Core. So a tough result for Ninjas in Pajamas. Nas still has not made his RLCS LAN debut. Oski is missing out for the second time here in his career. Of course, he missed at the beginning of his career because he was too young when Liquid signed the roster, and then they didn't pick up until the spring split there, so they couldn't qualify for Worlds, if I recall correctly. But a tough result for Itachi, who I went back and watched some film, and Itachi still looks really, really good. It just seems like they're kind of missing that finishing connective tissue, and I think Nas could definitely improve on both sides of the ball as well. High expectations for him just because we've seen how good he is, how gifted he is at the game. But just unbelievable stuff from Geekay. Really cool to see them make it here. Does this mean that they're going to be one of the favorites in Europe? No. I still think that Carmine Core are the best team in the world. I think that Vitality on LAN is going to be an absolute demon, and Dignitas is an X factor here. You can never count out Joyo and Archie, and Oli is a great player as well, and they really showed just some unbelievable form. The question will be, was that lightning in a bottle, or is that something that they'll be able to maintain and bring into Birmingham, where Joyo was born, which is a cool little segment of this story as well. But more to think about there. Let's go ahead and talk about expectations for North America, because I think it's a good segue to showing us what GK have continued to prove. We've seen historically that these final opens of the splits can kind of go very differently than what we might anticipate based on the results from 1 and 2. I think back to last season in Major 1, Open 3, the final regional event from the first split. We ended up having TSM, which was Creams, Hockey, and Wavy. They made I think they made it to the semifinals, which was a surprising result. And then if you go to the last regional of the split, we had Luna Galaxy making a finals in Europe. That was the Acronic, Atomic, and Tox roster. We had Moist and Shopify Rebellion. Moist was the former Pirates on a Boat, and Shopify Rebellion is the same roster. They both made top fours. We had Team Secret and Erased was the finals over in South America, with Furia getting cut out in a semifinals there. So as we look towards North America, there's a bunch of teams in the hunt. I think you probably draw the line around Deleted Gaming, probably. And I think Shopify Rebellion is a point behind them, although Deleted Gaming, they're a point ahead, and even though it's just a point, I think it makes it more reasonable. I got to go back and look here, but while I want to talk about some of the teams, I think we have to start out with what we had brushed on earlier. JNaps announced on Twitter that this is going to be his final event. He makes a top 16, which is really cool. And I haven't been a fan since the genesis of the RLCS, so I won't act like I'm the historian who is, super impassioned and embroiled in all the nooks and crannies of JNaps' career here. But I think if you want that perspective, there's a lot of people who you could go get it from online. I think what I was struck by is the fact that we had Garrett and AJ, to name a couple people from North America who were some mainstays. Mist seems to be gone as well, who retired this off season, and you just kind of feel like when you're watching this that these players are going to be these players forever. Vatira is going to be Vatira for the next 8 years. and it just moves quick, you know? Like it's still a young, burgeoning esport. We could definitely see these pros as the money starts to make more sense. If the money starts to make more and more sense, um, stick with this longer. Of course, Garrett and AJ and Squishy here, who are all retired, made a top 16 here for North America. So clearly they're still competitive in their older age relative to the esport. But, these careers just don't last forever. And I think I especially was thinking about this with Ninjas in Pajamas missing out here. Itachi is, I feel like, one of the better players in the world. I definitely felt that way last season. Um, he's on the short list of players who, if I were to try and build a team around, veteran who has done some winning, who elevates his teammates and continues to improve. Itachi checks all those boxes for me. He's probably a top 7 player in the world. In my opinion, certainly top 10. I don't have the list in front of me, but you know, you just got to appreciate these players while we have them because Itachi is and JNaps is an example of that. These great players just aren't going to be around forever. So I hope JNaps makes a run here with Eris and Aqua. Pioneers have had a little bit of a up and down season. The roster, the talent doesn't jump off the page at you, but Eris was on that Moist team that made a deep run to end last season, and Eris looked great in that open 6 as well. Aqua was part of the final Squishy roster, and they made a deep run as well. So, and JNaps certainly, wants to put a cap on the career. They're not going to win the whole thing, but Pioneers, it's going to be a fun ride, and I hope that they are super competitive along the way, and maybe pull off an upset or two. That'd be a really cool way for JNaps's career to come to a close here on the pitch. Certainly one of the better, if not the best, player in Canadian history. I'm not taking arguments at this time. Sorry, guys. Some of the other teams we have our eyes on. SSG, what are you guys? You make your grand finals and push NRG to the brink. You're up 3-1 in that grand finals. And then you miss out on Open 2 altogether. Don't even make the top 16. And if you just look at paper, it's like, oh, it went to round 5. They barely qualified this time. Their losses were to NRG and Complexity, who are both awesome teams. So I'm not really super worried about that. But for an SSG roster that decided to keep all of their young talent together from Snowmen last season and translate that to this season, get a huge org signing. This is kind of a prove it moment for them. If this team bombs out or doesn't have a good event and misses out here when it looked like they were in prime position to make their debuts at Birmingham, that's a team that you got to have your eyes on. I have no information. Maybe even if they bomb out, maybe they stick together. But my point is that for a team like this with high expectations who were looking to elevate from the excellent results that they improved on from last season, that's a team that you would have to be curious about if they end up missing out on things here. And the same goes for Shopify Rebellion, same goes for Gen.G, those teams that are have expectations or aspirations of making this first LAN event. If they are unable to secure their spot here, those are teams that you have to watch as well. I, of course, have talked about that Gen.G roster in a YouTube video previously about how they're in a weird spot. And I got to tell you, I've, had some regrets about making that video just because, the thing that excites me about this game is the excitement of this game, and seeing the success of people. So it's always tough to be like, I think this team should split, but the other team that I have my eyes on is Ultimates, right? They're kind of one of those teams that are on that second or third tier when it comes to teams that we're expecting at the LAN here. Of course, your top rung, at least for me right now, is uh, Carmine Core, NRG. I'm going to throw Vitality in there, and you can make an argument for Falcons depending on what their result this weekend is going to be. They did drop a series in the qualifiers to Infinity, which, by the way, if you're just really looking for something to do and want to watch a player, Vampires on that roster is a lot of fun. I watched back a couple of their series. I think that was from like Open 1, if I remember correctly. But yeah, he was rocking the stock Finnick and super fast, does a ton of scoring for them. Vampires is a really fun player, so surprising result for Falcons, but that Infinity roster is pretty good there, and that second tier is, Dignitas and Twisted Minds and Furia, those kind of teams. And for me, Ultimates are on that third echelon below all those teams that we had listed, just because I think this team might lack a killer instinct when it comes to the major. It's a pressurized situation for LJ kind of being hard capped previously in his lands at how high he can go. First killer, of course, looking to finally secure a major win here with a team that was has a ton of talent on it and is still built around him offensively. And Chronic, who could have gone different directions this offseason, kind of deciding to be on this team, and he brings that major winning caliber alongside him. But that was really more predicated on apparently Jack with an exclamation point and Nolly for sure. So this team could definitely sway my opinion a little bit, although I think it would take them really running over some teams like NRG or whoever they end up meeting in the grand finals to convince me to even consider moving them up a tier above this. I do feel pretty strong in my opinion of them, but opinions are always based on previous knowledge, and I will never be one to be embarrassed about changing my opinion if I gain some new perspective on something. So let's see what you got, Ultimates. And the same goes for a team like Complexity, who they're in like a ninjas in pajamas kind of spot where they've looked great, but they haven't been able to close out all the series that they could. They've really struggled and shown some signs of nerves late in some really big series. They almost allowed Jinji to come back, if I'm remembering the team correctly. Although it could have been, I'm incorrect. It was Shopify Rebellion who really were looking to make a comeback, and Complexity were completely fumbling all over themselves. And then Diaz on Neo Tokyo gets a save that is pixels away from being a goal that would send us to 7. So, or at least to overtime. So Complexity, I have some stuff to figure out as well. They are certainly not a lock. And the last team that I'm really interested in is Tech. They were exciting in Open 1, and this team has a lot of talent. Talk, of course, is one of those players who has been bubbling about. Evo getting a new opportunity. He's been streaming like crazy. And Calm, a player who gets the Reddles, Jack treatment, where it's Joria's, where it's like, oh, they're older, so they're worse. And it's like, are we sure? Like, Calm has still looked awesome. I felt like he was the best player on OG Esports at multiple points, especially on lands last season. So Tech only have a single point. Of course, they missed out on Open 2. We won't beat that dead horse, but Calm has still got it. And this team, just like GK, even less pressure. This is just show us what you got. So excited to see them. I want to get to the NBA team comps here, but before that, just a couple other scattered thoughts that I wanted to run by you guys. OCE, the time is weird, especially me for the East Coast. It is early in the morning. I stayed up and watched Michael and Will from Shift. They were doing Scrims World, and I stayed up till like 1 in the morning to watch some of those games, and it's just ridiculous. Like, I can't make those times happen on a recurring basis, but that region could go any way. You have Scrims World, of course, who had big wins over Wildcard and TSM to win Open 2. Of course, Wildcard are still right there. The Fever, Torsauce, Banana Head roster. You have TSM, you have Chiefs, and it really could go any way. So OCE Open 3 is going to be really, really intriguing. And then finally, South America has locked. Furia had already locked up their position, and then Team Secret are coming alongside them. I, of course, am really excited that Swift is going to be making his LAN debut. And alongside him, I was just doing some research into the teams that have already locked. If you had to guess, how old is KV1? I probably would have guessed 21, 22. KV1's 18, and this is going to be his 8th LAN appearance, RLCS sanctioned. He's made a couple other like World Cups and stuff like that as well. Gamers 8 or whatever. But for KV1 to be making his 8th RLCS LAN and only being 18 and completely changing his game from being a defensive stalwart to a really, really impressive offensive talent, especially when Furia is in the region and Complexity and Astromix rosters and, the Brad and Drops and Card and Kaio and Royalis and all these talented players, for KV1 to consistently be making so many LANs is really impressive. So good for KV1. Really hoping to see him do well here at Birmingham. All right, I have listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 European teams. And I want to give you some NBA comparisons based on what we saw from them in Split 1. Where should we start here? Let's start with the Gentlemates. Gentlemates Alpine. So much talent on this roster. Seiko handpicked it. And it reminds me a lot of the Phoenix Suns, who seem like they're in a position here where they're probably going to miss out on the playoffs. It seems like they're probably going to fall out of contention of even a play-in spot unless things change. They're on a losing streak here. Everybody's been talking about how tenuous and strained the relationship in the locker room is. Of course, they secretly were not shopping, but not shopping Kevin Durant before the trade deadline. Bradley Beal has the no trade clause, one of 2 players in the league with LeBron, so he wasn't going anywhere. Just seems like a really rough spot here. And for a team with a ton of talent and championship caliber players on board, to be bombing out like this is a real bummer. And it seems like, it reminds me of like how Matt Ishbia, the Suns owner, comes in and he puts this whole thing together, and now he's kind of stuck. And Gentlemates are in not an equally, because they do have the flexibility, but in a tough spot here as well. I mean, you handpick this team. What do you do? Like, are you going to move off of Radosin? Are you going to decide that Juicy is the odd man out here? I just really don't know what they do. So Phoenix and Gentlemates Alpine have a lot of similarities, in my opinion. Speaking of another team that now is in a tough spot, Ninjas in Pajamas, they remind me of the New York Knicks, because when you look at the roster on paper, you're like, oh man, Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson, he's about to come back. He's almost healthy. Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby. They have so much talent on the roster, and the same with Ninjas. But it's like, at the end of the day, do I really think that team is going to win a major or win the NBA championship? Not really. Like, I love all the players, don't get me wrong, and I really can't think of how you would change the roster for the better in a lot of ways, but I still have them lower than a lot of teams. So I think that they have some similarities. GK here, Golden State Warriors, just because wherever Jimmy Butler goes, Joyo and Jimmy Butler, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the results are. It doesn't matter what the regular season looks like. When it comes to the playoffs or when the moments are really intense, you just don't want to see Jimmy Butler or Joyo on the other side of the pitch. And now that we have, the trade here where Jimmy Butler comes in and him and Draymond have looked great together. You assume that it would have been an issue because Jimmy doesn't necessarily add a lot of shooting, which you kind of felt like they needed it, but just smart plays, backdoor cuts, and they seem to really, really be enjoying playing with one another. I feel the same sentiment about this GK team. Do I Am I going to bet that either of these teams could make it really, really deep into these? No, but am I going to, take the under and say that they won't make it? No, I'm going to completely not bet on them. I don't have all the faith in the world in them, but I definitely am not going to say that they cannot do it. That is for sure. And let me put a little mark on these so I don't double dip, so I know which ones I've already done here. What about Dignitas in the Cleveland Cavaliers? Where you respect the players. You're like Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, what a backcourt. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. You got all these role guys who are really fitting in nicely. Max Strus. And they're crushing it, right? Like in kind of a surprising way. Where you look at the talent and you're like, yeah, they look good, but there's also all these teams that have way more star power and big names on them, like when you see Dignitas stacked up next to Carmine Core and Vitality, you're like, but at the same time, Dignitas have just been winning like gangbusters, and the same goes for the Cavs, who I think as of recording this are number one in the East. And it really is tough for me to wrap my head around the idea of them winning the whole thing. Same goes for Dignitas, just for lack of that experience. Of course, apparently Jack has won a major, and Joris is definitely a veteran who's been around for a while. Donovan Mitchell has been in some big series late into the season when he was with the Utah Jazz, for example. And of course, the young talent, if you want to do a Stizzy to Evan Mobley kind of comparison, I feel like they're in similar kind of rungs of the grand scope of things when you think about young talent, where it's really, really exciting, but it's not like the first name out of your mouth. It's not like who's the best young player in the NBA. You're not like, oh, Evan Mobley, or who's the best young talent in the RLCS, Drowley, or a player like that. It takes you a couple to get to Stizzy, even though they definitely have shown the ability. So I think that they're in similar positions where they have surprised with their records and their running their respective conferences. And in some ways, of course, it's not a direct one-to-one because Carmine Core exists and Vitality and all of that. But I feel like they're pretty close in like the pecking order, at least for me when I'm making my predictions or projections for both of the sports respectively. And let's go a different direction here. We of course have Carmine and Vitality to get to, but what about Start Point and the Atlanta Hawks? Where you look at the roster, at least I do, and I'm like, oh man, I like all of these players, like Acronic and Matane, like ooh, and Eugen, like I love Eugen, that really exciting young player. And it's the same for the Hawks, where you go down this roster and it's like they just traded Bogdanovich, but I just watched that Court of Gold documentary on Netflix, and if you guys haven't seen it, you have to go watch it. It was incredible. And for somebody who hated the starting five, I thought it was boring. It was closer to The Last Dance in its excitement than it was starting five. But I walked away from Court of Gold being a really big Bogdanovich fan. Same goes for Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels. You just go up and down the roster. Am I crazy? Is Dyson Daniels? I said that with so much confidence, and I'm not going to shy away from it. I'm certain he is because he was a Pelican before. But is Dyson Daniels on that roster? He is, right? He's a Hawk. I'm not crazy. Yeah, he's a Hawk. You just go up and down the roster, and you're like, oh, I like that guy. I like that guy. I like that guy. But at the same time, Start Point end up what they're seventh or eighth here when it's all said and done for split one. And they just put on Twitter that they're not definitely breaking up, but they are exploring other options. Eugen is going to be somebody who's looked at very heavily here. But yeah, just really exciting players up and down the board, regardless if they're going to win or not. Like if I'm looking at the slate of games on a random Thursday night, and it's like it's Hawks Magic. I'm like, ooh, you know, Hawks Magic, huh? You don't say. Or something Hawks Clippers. I'm interested where I might not be interested otherwise, but it's like, oh, you know, start point synergy, huh? Like I could get down with that. So I feel like there's a lot of similarities between those two, at least how I look at them. And a lot of similarities as well between Ascend and the Detroit Pistons. I think Ascend probably got more buzz. That team is going to be splitting as well here. But they just do better than you would assume. Like Detroit right now is sixth in the East, which is crazy. I probably would have guessed they were 10th or 11th, but it's like, look at Detroit here, Cade Cunningham is red hot. I think he dropped like 36, 7 and 9 or something the other night. And you could do the same with this Ascend roster. Like people are really excited about Nico. Matt and Juke as well had really great seasons. So, just a lot of young, fun talent on a roster that is doing better than you would have anticipated. Another young roster, Celisao, they've broken up. They're more the Charlotte Hornets or like the Portland Trailblazers or the Utah Jazz, take your pick, than they are the Detroit Pistons, just because Celisao only made one top 16 here, but Rusty's, Mako, and Ever. Rusty's already said, by the way, before I started recording, him and Mozzarella are looking for a third. So that's a strong young French duo right there. But it's kind of like you knew they weren't going to win. So it's like the Hornets where it's like LaMelo Ball dropped 45 again and they still lost by 20, and Brandon Miller's out, which stinks. It makes that team less fun to watch. But, you know, I couldn't help but do a Celisao comparison because any opportunity to talk about Rusty's 95, I'm going to do it. What about Vitality in the Lakers? Probably one of the comparisons I feel the strongest about, not just because they're both wearing highlighter yellow as their colors, but also you are now pairing Monkey Moon, who is in the conversation to be the greatest of all time, with one of the best young players in the world in Zen. And they both have some stuff to figure out here. Neither of them are the favorites, but like defense is definitely going to be a problem for the Lakers, especially when you have LeBron, who's 40, Luka, who can turn it on a little more than I think people give him credit for, but is just not as athletic as a lot of guys. But again, a better defender than he's got credit for. And like Austin Reeves is on the roster. Just not a lot of guys where you're like lockdown defender. I mean, even Rui, like the best defensive player is Vanderbilt. If he can stay healthy. But if you're gonna get connect minutes, like you're gonna hunt him defensively. Rui is good on ball, but can fall asleep a little bit if he's off ball, backdoor cuts and stuff like that. So defense is gonna be a problem, and Vitality definitely have some things to figure out as well, but I'm still a huge believer in Vitality. Definitely a bigger believer in Vitality than I am in the Lakers, even to make it out of the West. Like, Oklahoma City's there, Denver's there. Minnesota have looked way worse than we would have anticipated this season. Memphis is still, floating around. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anybody. Golden State, maybe. But I would take the Lakers, I think, over Golden State and over Dallas, to be honest. So they're kind of in that position where it's like, am I really going to be like, there's no way that Luka and LeBron figure it out? I just can't do it. I can't do it. It's not going to happen, but I can't do it. And And it's the same with Vitality, where it's like, oh, NRG are so strong, and Falcons won FIFA E, and they're so strong, and Carmine Core are so strong. But it's like, look, like, well, whatever. Like, I still think Vitality could do it, and of course, Vitality are better than the Lakers. But you guys get my point. Um, 1, 2, 3, 4 left here. Let's save Carmine Core. Excuse me. What about Save the Game in the Chicago Bulls? I just had to talk about them because the Bulls are my team. It's really embarrassing, and I'll never give up my fandom just because I can't. I don't believe in giving up the fandom. It's the only sport in which I have a team. Um, Rocket League, I'll never have like a team. I have teams I like more than others. I have teams that I root for more than others, but I'll never have like, oh, I'm a Gentlemates fan, in the same way I'm a Bulls fan. But they trade away Levine, and we are stuck in this pointless, silly limbo of rebuilding around Kobe White and Patrick Williams. I mean, like, what are we even doing? Um, it's just sad. I'm not gonna cry. Um, but it's just like, what's the point? Josh Giddey's fun too. Really, it's kind of like Buzelis time. In the same way that Save the Game is like, let's see what Metzer's got. Like, it's not like anybody's waiting with a bated breath to be like, oh, is Extra and Astral gonna like pop here? It's really kind of like, oh yeah, Metzer is playing with some savvy vets, and it's like Buzelis is getting unlocked around Vucevic, who at one point in time with the Orlando Magic was like the best center in the league for a moment in time there. And you could say the same for Astral, and of course Extra. I'm sure there's a comparison for him as well. But Bulls and Save the Game end up missing the third open, which was a real bummer. They were the only team out of the top 16 to miss it, if I recall correctly. Two left. Let's go 100% in the Houston Rockets, where the offense is great. Houston actually has the most clutch wins in the NBA this season. They've been in 36 games that qualify as clutch, and I don't remember the exact parameters, but I think it's if the game is within like 5 points or 8 points or something like that within the last quarter, or I don't know, last 10 minutes, last 6 minutes, I don't know. But the clutch is like, and 100% here, I got to go back and check. I'm just sitting here like a savage, foaming at the mouth, waiting for Direct to update his spreadsheets, since we don't have Octane GG or Shift anymore here. But coming into Open 3, they had 16 overtime wins, which is just unbelievable. And the Houston Rockets have the most clutch wins here as well. And they're flanked by, who else was up there? I think Denver was up there in the mix with a lot of them. The Hawks, I think, were second, if I recall correctly. So not only the clutch factor, but also players where it's like a lot of rosters where it's like, yeah, I'm glad that guy is succeeding. Like, I think of Louis P next to a player like Fred VanVleet, where it's like, good for like, it's not like I was ever like looking into buying like a Fred VanVleet jersey, and it's not like I was like, guys, you got to go watch Louis P. But knowing what I know about their stories and like where they fit into the wider context of the esport in the scene here, it's like, I'm really happy to see them doing well. And there's young players that are exciting as well, right? Like Şengün and Jalen Green could be Rezi and Acro, or Amin Thompson, of course, is probably a better option than Jalen Green at this point in time. But young team, really clutch. They don't have the ability to make it. Houston's on a crazy slide right now. I think they're like 3-7 in their last 10 or something. So they're looking to kind of get things together. And 100%, like, that 100% GK matchup where it was like, whoever wins this still has a chance. if 100% beat out GK there is no chance, at least in my eyes, that they would have been able to overcome Dignitas. And even if they overcome Dignitas, no chance they beat Carmine Corps. GK were the only of those two teams who could do that. And I feel the same about Houston, where like even if they slide in, there's like no chance that Houston are going to be able to win a title. And I don't think that Golden State could do it as well, but they're probably close to that 3% that GK had. They're closer to the 3% than Houston would be, if not higher for Golden State. And finally, Carmine Corps, I went back and forth, and I'm embarrassed to tell you guys how much time I spent going back and forth on something that in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter, but Oklahoma City and Boston. Those are the two, right? Those are the two you have to choose. I think I ended up leaning more towards OKC just because they're the best team. They're winning. They're just beating everybody. You could draw comparisons to Shea and Vatira or Drali, depending on like which way you want to go. Like, you know, he's kind of in between. Like Drali's too young, Vatira's probably too old, relative contextually to where Shea finds himself. But we just saw Carmine Corps really struggle in a high pressure moment, and that's the same worry I have with OKC, who like even in something that like wasn't super important, and the same goes for Open 3. Like Carmine Corps already locked in the midseason tournament. The Thunder kind of like fell apart. And not like fell apart like completely, but like they did not look like themselves. And like Jalen Williams is your second best option, and he couldn't really get a bucket in some of those big moments late. I can't remember who they dropped out to. Were they in the finals? I think I'm getting confused where like it was the Lakers 2 seasons ago, right? And then this year it was the Thunder. And yeah, because last season it was Lakers and Pacers. And then who won it this year? Um, is it the Bucks? I can't even remember who it was. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Um, although it is going to drive me crazy, and maybe I'll put it up on the screen, or you guys know, and you'll be like, Bel-Air, it was. But you know, Carmine Corps the best team. Oklahoma City on paper the best team. But like this roster hasn't done it yet, and like we talked about the fears that I have around a player like Atau. Of course, it's tough to do this exercise because like Rocket League is only 3 players. If you want to go the other way, because Vatira has done some winning and Drali won a world championship, where the Thunder don't have that same championship pedigree, outside of Caruso, who won one with the Lakers, and that might be it. They've got to have somebody else on the bench who's done it, but you could say they're the Celtics, right? Where it's like, yeah, they're like the best team in the East. And the difference there is that like Boston aren't winning at the same clip. Although I think they've won like 10 out of their last 12 here or something. So they're putting it together a little bit better. But that's another team where Boston is probably the favorites to win it all, but you can make strong arguments for others. So it's a combo, right? Where it's like the Thunder or the Celtics and Carmine Corps are probably a little bit more of a sure thing than either of them against the field. I would say probably closer to Boston if I'm thinking about it. Maybe I think I'm just out on the Thunder, where a lot of people are like totally in and they're like they're gonna make the finals. I just want to see it first. Like I want to see this team of young guys like really prove it before I'm going to pick them over Jokic, or before I'm going to pick them over, you know, the Lakers is not a good example to use here, but I just want to see them win it before I'm going to say that they're going to win it. You know what I mean? I'm happy to be behind the curve on them. That is it for our NBA to European Rocket League team exercise. Very beautiful name. Really excited to see what North America is going to bring here to round out the season. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. It's going to go up on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Share it with your best friends. Put it on your MySpace page. Call your parents and tell them that they got to listen. Maybe we'll get some guests here in the future. I don't know. thank you so much, guys, for giving me some time out of your day to talk about some Rocket League and some hoops. So with that being said, I will catch you guys later. Hope you have a great rest of your morning, day, afternoon. Keep washing those dishes or doing that laundry or going on that walk or whatever you're up to right now. Definitely not listening while you're working because that would be inappropriate. Have a great day, guys. I will catch you guys later.